theatre, film, TV and more. Suzy Wrong reviews it all on Joy Drive.
Good afternoon, Suzy Wrong.
Good afternoon, Warren. One of the characters in today's movie never met his mother. That made me think of my own mother, who was an orphan. And she didn't know who they were. She didn't know where she came from. It was a big family mystery.
Isn't that funny? And so no one knew the background. No one knew what happened.
No one knew. And because she always looked different. She was adopted by a regular Chinese family in Singapore, but she looked different. And there was this kind of story that people would say that she was somehow moved away from Thailand. They imagined that she was from Thailand. So for many, many years, we thought that she was Thai, and therefore I was half Thai.
Oh, and you still don't know?
And then for many years, I decided to weave my own story and imagine that she was partially Indian because her complexion was a little bit darker. So I thought, back in the day, like mixed marriages, interracial relationships in the 60s, 70s were, in her case, like in the 50s, 60s, right, were incredibly frowned upon. So I thought that made sense to me. And then, I went and did those DNA testing.
Did you do one? And?
I did one with DNA test. And turned out I am super degular South China stock.
Oh, I mean, it's just like, so neither of those stories were correct.
Yeah, neither of those stories were correct. That I am zero exotic.
Oh. Suzy, you know what? She might have, there's a lot of Chinese people in Thailand as well. She might have gone over there for a little bit.
It could be.
The
DNA doesn't show that.
Right.
It's so interesting. Many years after I did the test, I told my father about it, and he still, like just 2-3 years ago, he still thinks that she's from Thailand.
Oh, really?
It was really interesting. Yeah.
Maybe she is, but just has the Chinese, ancestry. Do you have?
Yeah, I like that. I'll keep that story.
Yeah. I reckon. Look, you know what? It's funny because my mum never. Her father left her mother when she was like a month or so old, so she never met her father at all. And it was like you, it was taboo in those days. I think he was having an affair or something. I don't know. Something happened, but it was taboo in those days. And it's interesting how, nothing was spoken about because it was considered so wrong. And I couldn't help but feel for my grandmother and my mother to not have, the closure of the story as such because of the pressures of it being such a shameful thing to happen. I mean, it's really sad in a way. Did you find it impacted your mum at all, not knowing who her
I think so.
was?
Yeah, I think so. I think she's had a lot of trauma in that way. She was adopted by a very violent woman as well. So it's very hard to know, what's come from where, but I can definitely see how she grew up unloved.
Do you have like do you like Thai food?
I am obsessed with Thai food.
There you go. That's it. That's the story.
I feel like the national dish of Australia, from the perspective of someone who lives in Sydney, is pad Thai, for sure.
That's so true, isn't it? It's like everyone always orders pad Thai.
That's right. When I'm away in Singapore, usually, I always think, when I go back, I gotta have a really good pad Thai.
Do you go in Thailand? I like the glass noodles.
Oh, I haven't been to Thailand for many years.
Suzy, we should go. We'd eat a lot.
We need to have a Joy Drive holiday.
I think so. I think we should. Now, we are talking about a movie. I watched it last night. It's called, am I pronouncing it right? It's AICHAKU?
I think so.
Yep.
In a remote area of Chiba in Japan, an English language teacher from America named Lucas meets local construction worker Ken, and in the space of a weekend, they fall hopelessly in love. The 2-hour movie AICHAKU, with dialogue in both Japanese and English, is now available to watch for free on Plex TV. Lucas and Ken each have their own dreams. The immigrant man intends to stay permanently in Japan, while his new lover's plans involve going to America. The real challenge, however, lies with Lucas's visa status, and for many who have found themselves embroiled in similar situations, we understand just how unsettling it is to live with so much uncertainty, not really knowing whether one is going to be banished or allowed to stay. Ken has his own troubles that pertain to his identity, but thankfully not about his queerness. AICHAKU is refreshing for not introducing queer trauma into the story. In that way, it is a modern take on the gay romance, and I certainly found the story engaging and relieved that it's not another film about the pains of coming out. AICHAKU, however, is not a particularly well-made film. The performances are labored and the direction is inconsistent in both style and tone. There is plenty that felt jarring for me throughout the film, but the narrative is strong enough and the cinematography thoughtful enough to have me watch until the end. AICHAKU is a sweet little movie. It shies away from dealing with homophobia in Japan, but it sets a fine example of how gay life could be in an imaginary ideal world, where gay people don't have to contend with anything more than what their straight counterparts do. It is a very PG sort of affair, which means it's something you can watch with your family or when you're in the mood for something not too challenging. Warren, I don't always know how you would react to my picks, but this one I know for sure that you would enjoy the eye candy.
Suzy, you know what? This movie you mentioned, it's not well made, and I agree with you. It's not well made, but it didn't detract from the experience and the enjoyment in watching the film. You know what I loved about it the most is there's so much stuff going on in the world at the moment, so much stress, so much bad news, etc., etc. I was completely zoned out, and it was it was almost an innocent type of drama. I loved it, Suzy. I really enjoyed it. I got to the end and I was smiling and I'm thinking, what a happy story. And I was even laughing at the end, at the mother. We won't spoil it, but it was just great. I really loved it. I thought it was such a...
It's innocent.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of idyllic, like farm imagery, rural imagery.
Lots of
it's
imagery.
Very sweet and it's very nice. It's sweet. I thought it was very nice. I wish it had a bit more sophistication in how it was made, but it was just such a nice story, and it actually had enough complexity, even though it was a very kind of sweet kind of story. It didn't feel cheesy. Yeah,
No.
that was what it was sweet and romantic, but it didn't feel cheesy.
I agree with you. And it's the kind of film that it doesn't hit you straight away. It kind of just stays with you. That's what I thought about it afterwards. I felt really good. It's interesting that you were talking about your mother, Suzy, and, not knowing whether there's Thai in you or not. It's kind of because this movie was all about really the past, wasn't it? Carrying the weight of a person and their past, whereas it's interesting your mother didn't have that as such to carry. Does that make sense?
That's right. That's right. And I feel like I wish I knew more. I don't really know why. I just feel like it would be so useful to know where my grandparents and my great grandparents, etc., come from. I think it would be such a nice way to to kind of put contextualize your own life, especially as someone who has migrated over the oceans from one country to another. It would be nice to be able to track back to where my grandparents, great grandparents, great great grandparents came from. That I'm a continuation of that journey.
Yet in this movie, knowing and not necessarily knowing the story, but knowing where they came from, and knowing the story of the father and the expectations and the legacy that went with him, especially when that person is no longer there, it was always adding pressure to what the main character had to do next, and then the ability to let go of that. So knowing it and then letting go of it, letting go of the path that is determined by your relatives, your parents or your grandparents, was so freeing for this person in the film. Ken was his name. I thought Ken was a great name for him.
Yeah, I like that the film has got quite sensitive, thoughtful bits, even though the tone of it felt kind of childish, kind of cartoony. But actually, the way the story moved around and the way it developed, it had a few quite unexpected things happen, and it just surprised me, I guess, ultimately. And I got to the end thinking, oh, I'm surprised that I got to the end, and I'm surprised that I wouldn't actually recommend that people watch it.
Suzy, if you think about stepping away from expectations that people put on you, particularly family expectations, I don't know if you had that in your life. Did you have expectations put on by your parents on you? And then if you did, when you stepped away from them, did you feel guilty at all? Or did you feel free?
I think I had the opposite of that experience when I was very, very small. I think probably 5 years old. My father had set up his own company, and it had become successful really quickly. And I had this discussion that I remember till this day. I said, oh, does that mean I follow in your footsteps? Does that mean that I inherit the business? And he, without even blinking, he just said, this has nothing to do with you. Your life is completely your own journey. At that moment, I felt quite rejected. I felt like, oh, you don't want me to be part of your story, but looking back, it has freed me a lot. It's such a profound moment that you can sort of take for granted. But I look back and I think, oh, actually, I have been freed in so many ways because of little things that my parents have said and done.
And I mean, also, at what point if you had to honour someone else's start or business, would it cost who you are? I wonder if, you'd be the Suzy Wrong that we speak to now if you had have taken over the business.
Yeah, we witness it all the time, right? People who have to take on that burden or that legacy that they inherit, and they have to make a lot of concessions to be able to carry that on. I don't have that, which resulted me in having a life that is just full of freedom, which I'm very grateful for. But like I said earlier, at the same time, I'm always wondering about the legacy, because I feel like I've gone quite far. If I'm thinking, again, I'm imagining what my ancestors were. Like a lot of people in Singapore come from extremely impoverished circumstances in China that people had to leave because of famine and all that. And I'd like to think that they would have left thinking that, oh, I want my offspring, I want my family to have a better tomorrow. And sometimes I think, oh, that's a really long journey, and actually I'm living probably a dream that they wanted. Probably, hopefully.
And I imagine choosing your own life can feel like you're letting someone down as well, even when they're not there anymore, but you don't have the cost.
No, I always think, my personality is such that I'm always thinking that my mother, who's in heaven, is very proud of me and is always conspiring to give me all the pleasures and successes in life. That's how I think. And obviously that's because she's given me a lot of love while she was alive, and I carry that on with me, that she's always regarding me with love. Even if I do stupid things, even if I do things that I suspect that she might not agree with, I'm thinking ultimately she loves me and she'll be fine.
She's probably talking to my mum saying, you too. The thing I took from the movie, and just to finish up, is it's not just about what we carry from the past, Suzy. It's about how much of it we let define who we are now. And that's what I took from it. I loved it. The movie, it is called, I've got to make sure I say it right. It's AICHAKU, is it? AICHAKU, AICHAKU, AICHAKU. I reckon go and see it if you can. Suzy Wrong, what are we watching next week?
Dan Levy's got a new comedy series coming out on Netflix. Big Mistakes tells the story of siblings blackmailed into the world of organized crime. I'll see you next Tuesday for Big Mistakes on Netflix. But for now, the song we're going out with is Madonna's Crazy for You.
Why?
I thought about this song because Warren texted me last night, extremely excited about the very good-looking man who's playing Ken in the movie. And I thought that just sounded like a teenager. And this was a song from our teenage years about infatuation. Crazy for you.
See you, Suzy.